Welcome again, Ryan. How you doing?
Good, Steve. I was worried about you. I meant to check in and I didn't. I should have been a better friend. But you went to three of the World Series games. Your beloved Toronto Blue Jays gave the Dodgers a fight, but couldn't pull it off. So I'm sorry. How are you doing?
Um, well, disappointing outcome, right? But that's baseball. But I'll say this is I went to a lot of Blue Jays games this year, and going back to May and to June, you could just tell watching in the ballpark that there was something very special about this team. And one of the great performances in the history of postseason baseball was done by a guy named Ernie Clement, who says this was a team of uncommon men, and this team of players of minor leaguers, the 22-year-old rookie Trey Savage, who couldn't go out with the team when they won the AL East because he had an exam the next day. Um, Recovering from this 18-inning game, right? How a baseball series ends, and there's so many stories through the history of baseball, and it's such a metaphor for life. But for me, I in my career, I've had a lot of professional sports clients, um, teams, players, and once you become part of the business, I found it hard to be a fan. And the thing that I'm like really grateful to the Blue Jays about, and especially his team, it fully gave me back in a time of like real crisis in the world, gave me back a tremendous gift. And that's baseball again, right? As like a true fan of a great sport, and being able to watch this World Series, one of the greatest in the history of the sport, some of the greatest players in the history of the sport, the drama of it, but more than anything, that this team that no one had expectations of coming within 2 outs of the championship, enthralling the country, enthralling the city. Just for me, watching the stoicism of the manager, John Schneider, appreciating the tale of Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Schneider, their minor league coach, coming up through this moment. The cast of characters, a guy who hits the grand slam that's sleeping on his teammate's couch. I mean, this was not a team of superstars with $1 billion payroll. This was a team that had its superstars, but um had people like Nathan Lucas, who was 32 and had spent his career in the minor leagues and was ready at the beginning of this year to say, I gave it my shot. And it was an extraordinarily like exciting thing and a pure thing to be a part of. And in all the games that I got to see this summer, and going there, the Blue Jays just is such a great experience at that stadium. It's such a great fan base, such a great vibe, and I just seem to be like a great team. But in this moment for me, it was something very special, something I got to share with a lot of my family, a lot of friends, over the course of the summer. Brought a lot of joy to me, a lot of happiness. And so, I know I have a lot of affection for the players, for the team, that are just enhanced by it. And just, in the end, and I joke around, I have a little bit of perspective. I said, I've managed too in a big game, presidential politics. I'd argue it's the greatest non-lethal competition, and there is no next season. And I've been on two teams, been on one that we won a presidential campaign, and one where we lost the presidential campaign. And you see a guy like Jeff Hoffman, who was the pitcher who gives up the home run that ties the game. And after the game, he takes the blame. He says, I cost my friends, my teammates the World Series. And his teammates say, nonsense. There's no one they'd rather have back out there tomorrow. And that is the mark of a great team. And in the age of selfishness, to see a model of love, to see a guy like Chris Bassett. We talk about the crisis in young men. When you see a pitcher in the major leagues as great as Chris Bassett talking in the aftermath of this, and what he's saying is how much he's going to miss the men that he played with, that the experience of the team, right? That's what's ending. And the emotion of that was very, very real in a time where what's being pounded down people's throats is a lot of things that aren't real. And everything that the Blue Jays stood for in the end, right, that matters isn't the outcome, but it's the journey. Life's about the journey,
Hmm.
right? Don Mattingly, whether he has a World Series ring or not, is no less great. And what we saw was a type of greatness and almost providential intervention where this ball gets stuck, dead ball, first time ever in the history of the stadium. And but for that, the Blue Jays win the World Series. It's not about the ring, it's about the moments in life. And that's what baseball is the great metaphor for. It's why it is the greatest sport. And so for me, it reconnected me to something that I deeply loved and have come to love again. And that I was able to be apart from all of the crises of the moment. And when I stand in a Canadian ballpark with my hand on my heart during the American national anthem, right? You go through that part of the anthem in every game, and our flag was still there.
Hmm.
And our flag will still be there. And in the end, this team of uncommon men, and they captivated me for sure. And they got just a diehard fan for life. And I love them more in defeat because in the whole of all of it, it's a character test. And it was the team of the greatest character of any professional sports team that I've ever seen. Love.
Wow. Um, that was amazing, Steve. 11 minutes on
Love.
that was beautiful. And I'm sorry they lost. As I told
Yep.
Lisa, I was rooting for the Dodgers. LA's had a tough enough time this year.
Yep.
And but I didn't watch a single game. So obviously
No, yeah.
not enjoy the baseball season the way you did this year. I just couldn't I couldn't get
It
into it.
said
Do you
something
think it's
that
the best?
Trump called them both losers, both teams.
Yeah,
Right? It says something.
because he treats any institution, any geographical location that in his fevered imagination is against him as an enemy.
Uh,
Um, and um, it'll be very interesting to see if the Dodgers show up at the White House or if they get invited to the White
they're
House
not
for
going to
the.
get invited. Trump said that. He said neither
Well,
of the loser
he says a
teams
lot of
will be
things.
invited. And no, of course the Dodgers will not go to the White House.
Yeah, well, I think we talked about this last time. Obviously, California is going to celebrate this in a big way, and Newsom will have to play the ceremonial role of a political leader that celebrates a team winning the most important sports event in in America. And it's just like, I know this is a small thing, but it is it tells you just basically everything you need to know about Trump. If you had like missed the last 10 years and you sort of dropped down into our politics and you saw Trump as president and saying what he said about the Dodgers and not inviting them, that would you basically get caught up pretty quick about how far things have fallen because it's just something as graceless as that is just unthinkable for any previous president who sort of thinks with this bizarre us and them mentality. Everything is zero sum. Everything's about a spoil system. And I know it's a small thing, and there are lot of things to get outraged about these days. But it is so telling about how small minded and vindictive he is. That what used to be celebrated across the country, the World Series winner, and culminating in a visit to the White House, that tradition is just gone. Just another American tradition that he's just stomped on. And I know it's a small thing, but it is just so depressing. It is so depressing that someone we have right now that is just destroying one tradition after another, the same way he destroyed part of the White House. Um, is to pivot off that a little bit, where do you rank this World Series, Steve?
It's one of the greatest, and it's one of the greatest for the performances of the players and the grit of the teams, these extraordinary extra inning games. But baseball has always, through its endurance in our history, taken place during our moments of crises. And the game is shaped by the events that surround it. And I think one of the important things to recognize about this World Series and the game is that it refutes some core premises of MAGA. Starting with, let's just look at this game, at the excellence of an Ernie Clement, who was looking at the end of his baseball career. He was cut by Cleveland, signed to a minor league contract. Ernie Clement has more hits in October than any player in baseball history. Look at the Japanese players on the mound for the Los Angeles Dodgers. When Douglas MacArthur went to Japan after the defeat of the Japanese Empire in World War II, they cleared out the stadium where the Giants played, where munitions were stored. And he said, start playing baseball again in Japan. It'll be good for democracy. The greatest player maybe in the history of the sport, Shohei Ohtani, Yamamoto's performance on the mound, the great Canadian player and the great Dominican player, Vladimir Guerrero. These are teams that are mosaics of humanity. We have a player, a 5'6", 250-pound catcher, Alejandro Kirk from Tijuana, Mexico, on the Toronto Blue Jays. So Mexicans and Dominicans and Americans and Canadians on a Canadian team facing the Los Angeles Dodgers. And under both teams' stadiums, there's a circle with the number 42, that stands for Jackie Robinson, one of the most graceful of men, abused by the type of malice that's rising again. And he endured through a type of ugliness and hate that is one of the great acts of valor in the history of all sports and also all of American history.
Hmm.
And all of that under that banner of Jackie Robinson in these two stadiums over really what amounted to 8 games plus, what we saw was excellence, was achievement, was passion and good fortune and bad luck and excellence. And we saw a young man, Trey Savage, shatter records. We saw superstars exceed expectations. And we saw millions of people together sharing that experience, which refutes through a common bond all of the miseries imposed upon us by the vast division industries. And so it was something that was deeply important and deeply meaningful. One of the great World Series, a Canadian team against the Dodgers, which is historically the team of Black America, the team that gave Jackie Robinson a shot, a team that brought baseball to the West Coast, where one of the greatest pitching performances in the history of Major League Baseball is made by a Japanese pitcher in an era where Trump says, if you're MAGA, you're a Superman of sorts. There's no greater bullshit eradicator than what we just witnessed. And it was great.
All right, I've got to eat some words, Steve. I missed this entirely yesterday, but Trump did post on Truth Social that he congratulated the Dodgers and he said, "I'll see you at the White House." And so he did reverse himself. He has invited them, and so what I just said before you spoke was incorrect. He's as I said before, he often reverses himself, and he did. And I think it's just to be fair, it's worth pointing out this is obviously the second World Series the Dodgers won in a row. And he did have the Dodgers at the White House earlier this year to celebrate their 2024 World Series victory. So that's an important correction on my part. And now it'll be interesting. Now we'll have a little bit of a political fight among folks in LA and some of the team members about whether they go or not, because a lot's happened in LA and with Trump since the last time this team was at the White House earlier this year. So, big important correction. I just wanted to, make that clear. It doesn't change my view about anything about Trump, obviously.
I'll give you another athletic prediction about politics and flags and things ahead. So we have an Olympics coming up. And there's a tradition regarding the American flag that the American flag is never lowered and honored. It's never dipped or draped to another foreign head of state. And really, this tradition's most splendid moment is when in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, the only flag that does not get dipped, put parallel to the ground as it goes by Adolf Hitler, is the American flag, which remains upright, not lowered. And Hitler is enraged by this. But you'll see this at the Olympics, is that a lot of nations will lower their flags to Trump, right? And it'll just skate the ground parallel. The American flag, by tradition, is not one of them, but I wonder if they're going to find a MAGA athlete who will dip the American flag to Donald Trump as it goes by. There's no law, only custom and tradition that says that doesn't happen. And there's always a debate about this by the flag bearer when they get the honor. This always is something that's talked about in the moment with that history lesson. So we'll look ahead to that moment where Trump is sitting in Los Angeles at the Olympics, if we have an Olympics, and we'll see as the nations come by what tributes they give to Trump, and if the American athletes dip the flag to Trump. And so there's no escaping politics in this moment. There's no escaping politics if you're a Japanese pitcher on a mound in a country where baseball is the national pastime. We fought a war 80 years ago where the commanding general who came to the occupation to rebuild the country said as a first order of business, let's start the baseball back up because it's good for democracy. And you had Japanese Americans interned in this country, and you had baseball that desegregated in 1947. Politics is everywhere, and politics has always been part of baseball from the beginning. And so the visits to the White House, the questions around the Olympics, people will sometimes say, "Well, let sports be sports," and that's nonsense, because sports is life, and life is sports, and the politics is life, and it's everywhere now.
All right, Steve, let's a few things on my mind today that I just want to throw at you. Um, One is that it is about Jack Smith. I Smith has made a couple he's done a couple of public interviews, basically interviews that were sort of private that but then became public. And he's in this fight right now with Congress over going up there and giving testimony, and he wants it to be out in the public. Of course, Republicans, they don't want that because it's too risky. They want it in private so they could leak any embarrassing details. Um, but of all of the investigators, of all the people that worked at the Department of Justice that Trump has attacked and maligned, Merrick Garland, Lisa Monaco, um, Smith is the one that is actually out there defending himself, defending his investigation, and out there is maybe a little bit of an exaggeration. It's not like he's doing interviews every day. It's not like he's on social media, but he is defending himself, defending the rule of law, and I think is very, very eager to go public in a hearing and to actually set out in a public way the case against Trump that was sort of short circuited by the Supreme Court decision, and defend the rule of law and defend the norms and regulations and tradition of the Justice Department that have been eviscerated this year. And he was just someone who was silent. That we barely had any pictures of the guy. And I think this kind of Trump versus Smith battle is going to be extremely interesting to watch because this guy is no coward. It was an act of bravery to even step into that role, knowing what would happen to him. The Republicans are very worked up about his seizing the phone records, not the actual content of conversations, but who called whom of Republicans in Congress. So they want to make a big stink about that. So I think that they think they have a big political issue there, and I think that may push them to make the mistake of thinking that they can humiliate Jack Smith and turn his investigation into something for the history books that was illegitimate. And I think they're making a huge mistake. And I think he himself is going to prove to be a really, really important voice in defense of the way things were in this country when it comes to the rule of law in a way that, frankly, any of the previous Biden administration officials and who were involved in any way with the Trump investigations maybe don't even have the credibility to do. Have you been watching? You have any thoughts on him?
I do. I think that the position of that there be no secret testimony is precisely correct, and he should hold the line on that. And as a matter of the politics of it, you just hope that the MAGAs can be baited into doing this in public and be convinced. And part of the convincing will be, I think, pretty easy because Trump demands performance by his sycophants on television combating his wicked foes. And so the idea that Trump won't be able to see Jack Smith's comeuppance because the Republicans are too chicken shit to face Jack Smith in public doesn't work out in the end for the audience of one that all those Republicans care most about, which is Donald Trump, who wants to see the gladiatorial combat. He wants to see it, right? That's why Pam Bondi goes up there like she does. It's why Kash Patel goes up there like he does, that it's the reality show. So Trump is a guy who's going to desecrate the White House beyond its demolition by hosting in the shadow of its demolition a mixed martial arts event, a UFC fight, right? So the idea that Trump, who I don't necessarily know if he can read beyond a fifth or sixth grade level, and I mean that very seriously, right? Trump will get no satisfaction from reading the lengthy transcripts of the congressional record. He wants to see it on television. So this is going to be public. And this will be a big moment because in this moment, right, we have somebody pitching who across the board is going to have 50 less IQ points than does Jack Smith. So it's going to be great theater.
And so there's a good piece in the New York Times about some of this today, and that suggests Republicans on the Hill are divided about this because some see this as a trap, and we should point out, this goes without saying, that Trump has said on Truth Social that Jack Smith is a criminal and should be investigated. There's a kind of like truly alarming quote in this piece, or I guess it's a paraphrase from an anonymous long-term Trump advisor that says, up until now, Trump has been able to order up investigations on his enemies like Ubers. I found that so jarring because it's just sort of stuck into the middle of this piece without much more comment than that, and sort of just a sign of where we are, that kind of like ha anonymous quote from a political advisor is just sort of part of the political conversation now, rather than it's as if, during the Nixon administration, Woodward and Bernstein were, just threw in a line about, up until now, Nixon's, been able to use the CIA to go after his opponents, but that may be coming, maybe a little more politically difficult going forward. It's like turning these sort of Watergate level scandals about abusing the Justice Department into just kind of like just the weather now. Anyway, that aside, I think it's Jack Smith's lawyer said, name the time and place, and Jack will be there. Smith has he's been very smart here in sort of I think outsmarting some of the Republicans on the relevant House committees, and he's demanded that he be allowed to talk about any evidence that was put in front of grand juries. And so that request is sitting there now at the Justice Department, and they haven't responded yet. And so that's the second thing. Everyone's been talking about the public. He's demanded this be in public, but the second thing is he's demanded, I want the ability to talk about anything. And of course, Republicans only want to talk about one thing so far. The only thing that they have seized on is his investigation of Republican members of Congress and their phone records post January 6th. So I'm with you. I think he's just smarter than these guys, and he has shown that he has absolutely nothing to hide. That he believes his investigation was conducted with complete, with the highest standards of the department, and you just don't see anyone else on coming out of that world who is willing to defend the rule of law and what happened in the Biden years. I don't think Merrick Garland is eager to get involved with any of this. Um, so anyway, this guy is going to he's clearly preparing for a big public confrontation with Trump that is going to reopen essentially Trump's felonies. And I think Trump is so angry and so hell bent on trying to destroy this guy. And Republicans, of course, even if they think it's politically stupid, are just going to salute. And I predict this guy is. I predict Jack Smith is going to get the better of Trump here. That Trump is just doesn't understand the sort of politics at play here. But it's just an absolute act of bravery to have the president sicking the entire Justice Department on you, right? And Smith just saying, "Bring it on."
It's really the
So
only thing. It's really the only thing that he can do. He's an American under siege from his government, and he's making a stand on a foundation of truth. He's a hero, and he should have all of our admiration. Here's the deal. Donald Trump poisoned something foundational in the country. The entire cornerstone of our civilization is built upon the idea that the American people choose their leaders. And when Donald Trump lost an election, he did what he said he would do for years, which is fail to recognize a legitimate result unless he won. And he broke the society by triggering an insurrection, a violent mob of criminals that violently assaulted hundreds of policemen, bludgeoned them with flags, killed a handful of, and he pardoned those people. But that event happened. And it does not matter what lies, what abuses of the truth, what corruptions infect the news media, that will always be true. And that is why Jack Smith is being hounded,
absolutely.
persecuted, attacked, and the American people should not stand for it.
And this is important because there's another big issue here at play that the Trump administration is going to try and fuck with. As you just mentioned, half of what Trump has tried to do, one of his big projects this year has been to rewrite the history of January 6th. And this has now just become a Republican Party operation. Just to completely rewrite the history. And there's never any consistency. Sometimes it's a Democratic plot or an Antifa plot, and a Biden administration agents in the crowd that did the whole thing. Other times, it's just that it was a totally peaceful protest, totally legitimate. The election was stolen, and of course, these this crowd stirred up by Trump had every right to do what they did. And look, in Trump's first act was to pardon everyone and to let everyone know that in the future, if something similar happens, you have you should have no fear about any consequences because I've got your back. I've got the power of the pardon. Jack Smith has a 2-volume report on his investigation. The first volume was submitted to Garland before the Biden folks left back in January. It's not been public. The second volume, and that one is about Trump's efforts to overthrow the 2020 election. And knowing what we know about this investigation and knowing what we know about Jack Smith, that report will be an absolute blockbuster and probably the definitive historical account of what really happened, given the powers that he had as a prosecutor. The second volume, which contains a detailed accounting of Trump's retention of classified documents and his efforts to obstruct the investigation, according to the New York Times, was blocked. A Trump-appointed district court in Florida blocked that from even being released. And so Democrats who see this as an opportunity and realize that Trump and Republicans are being pretty damn stupid about messing with Jack Smith, have another request in to Pam Bondi, which is to release all of these documents. And so I think this is, I don't see, I mean, they could be completely hypocritical, I guess, but given that the Senate and House committees that are looking into this have been selectively leaking parts of the investigation that they think show Jack Smith went too far, and that he cast too wide a net. He was going after Republicans. That's their case right now. And that stuff has been released by Chuck Grassley and others. I don't. If there is a clamor from Democrats, and they will be, I think they're smart to make an issue out of this. Not that it's going to be the most important issue for most Americans, but it is important enough for them to go forward here. They're going to get those reports at a certain point. There's going to be whether Pam Bondi has to. She's going to. There's going to be a lot of pressure to release them, and I think between Smith's own testimony and the definitive account that the Trump administration is essentially hiding right now, it's going to come out. And this fight is going to force another turn of the wheel about the narrative of these events, both Trump's criminal acts in the classified document case, and his actions with respect to the January 6th, but then also the larger story of January 6th. And I think Jack Smith is his sort of bring it on mentality here is very, very smart because he knows there is an effort to bury this history and rewrite it. And it's going to be one of the most important fights that we have in Washington. Is the actual truth about these events going to come out? Or is it going to be buried, rewritten by the Trump administration, and the people who are looking for the truth are going to be, prosecuted and thrown in jail the way that Trump wants them to? And that, to me, that's a really, really important fight for the truth and the history of some of the most important events in modern American history. So, all right. We've exhausted that topic. Let's move on to something else, but keep something to watch. I know you want to talk about the fact, Steve, that Trump seems hell-bent on getting us involved in military confrontations in various parts of the world. What's on your mind?
Well, I so you out of the ether Donald Trump is talking about that we may need to be at war in Nigeria because of Muslim persecution of Christians. And so the great peacemaker, and we saw the delusional interview on 60 Minutes last night, and all of it is insane. I want to step back for, if we could, from all of the present insanity, because we have a harbinger of where everything is going. And that came from the Nick Fuentes interview with
Oh,
Tucker Carlson. So Tucker Carlson was labeled this weekend by a Republican congressman as the most dangerous anti-Semite in America. And the Republican Congressman Randy Fine goes on at some length decrying Tucker Carlson. But of course, the Republican MAGA congressman stands on the same side as Tucker Carlson, which is on the side of MAGA. The Republican congressman says to the American Jewish Coalition that Tucker Carlson is not MAGA. But when you look at the record and you see Tucker Carlson sitting in the box at the Republican convention, sitting on the stage at the inauguration, Tucker Carlson is MAGA. And there is a schism in MAGA. And so let's look at the heir apparent, J.D. Vance,
just pause it for a second because
right?
I think it's just the schism, Steve, is basically anti-Semites and people who are okay with anti-Semitism and people who aren't.
Well, let's explore the schism. The Tucker Carlson interview with Nick Fuentes, who's a Nazi. He is a full-on, flat-out Nazi. He is a Gen Z David Duke and then some. No exaggeration, no augmentation. He's a Nazi. Repugnant as they come. And so there is a huge outcry about this interview. And the head of the Heritage Foundation, who writes, authors, Project 2025, decries.
Kevin Roberts.
His name is Kevin Roberts, and he attacks people like me as part of a venomous coalition who would dare to object to Tucker Carlson with this Nazi, and that the Heritage Foundation, well, they will never disassociate from the nation's leading anti-Semite, Tucker Carlson. So, boom. Now, you have a MAGA coalition where one of the largest funders of it is Miriam Adelstein, Sheldon Adelson's wife.
Adelson, yeah.
You look at all of the words, all of the commitments, all of the MAGA posturing about Israel, about Jews, and you see clearly as you get ready for 2028, you will have a pro-MAGA, pro-Israel faction where Jews are welcome versus a Nazi faction where they're not. And Tucker Carlson, who has talked about his battle with demons in the sleep, who can do the Christian nationalist insanity better than anybody, is going to run for president in 2028. And he's going to run with the Nick Fuentes wing and full support behind him. And what history teaches is that in a competition, between the fascist and the collaborating conservative. The fascist with the teeth devours the toothless conservative. So the Randy Fines who look at a Tucker Carlson and say, oh, he's an anti Semite. Well, he's an anti Semite that you brought to power. He's an anti Semite you have been in league with, that you were a party to trying to overturn the will of the people with. Somebody with whom you tried to overthrow the Constitution with. And now you denounce him as an opponent. He's your partner. And in the end, your partner will devour you. He'll destroy you. And the anti-Semitism that is growing by leaps and bounds out of the ground will reveal itself every day forward as more of a feature, because it's always a feature where you find fascists and Nazis colluding together to take power, which is exactly what we're seeing. And so the future is dark,
It's
dark with
very
these people.
it's very dark. And look, this is the same this is of a piece with the young Republicans who weren't all that young, texting scandal. And
They were pushing 40. I mean, you had some of them were state senators,
yeah,
and they're
but
celebrating Hitler in ovens,
yeah, but
and they're not.
this is what defines MAGA now is is that there should be no taboos. That if there's a taboo, that breaking that taboo is just inherently good. There is this warped sense of what free speech means, and this sort of victim complex that if you raise subjects or have a friendly conversation with a leading anti-Semite, that it's just pearl clutching, to use Steve Bannon's phrase, Steve Bannon, who defended Carlson's interview with Nick Fuentes, that it's just pearl clutching to criticize this. And everything is now framed in terms of free speech. That anyone who objects to this is somehow, uh, a prude and a kind of Puritan censor, which of course nobody is talking about Tucker Carlson's right to have an interview with any lunatic, fringe, Nazi, anti-Semite, racist that he wants to. That's not the issue here at all. Um, but this mindset has become so ingrained in MAGA that it leads people to defend anything now. You have the vice president defending the texts from those Republicans because there's such hatred of the other side that they are just pushed into insane positions and refuse to draw like obvious bright lines about the difference between, talking about, say, you know, trans rights issues, which I think there was or what some on the right would describe as overzealous, political correctness. They think that is the same as platforming an anti-Semite to just go on about world Jewry and all the other batshit anti-Semitism that Nick Fuentes traffics in. That is where they are. And I think some of the backlash against the left, maybe 5 years ago, when sort of some of this was at its peak, it makes sense to me. I understand it, but it has now become a religion, right? And Tucker Carlson has decided to just sort of push it as far as he can, and then when criticized, people like Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, Steve Bannon, who continues to be an important voice in this movement, will defend it. And there's no, I mean, at this point, there's absolutely no one that a figure like Tucker Carlson, who has the number 2 podcast on Spotify, just behind Joe Rogan, there's no one he could platform that that people on the right wouldn't defend and say this is great. He's just he's just having a conversation. It's good to understand these views. I mean, from his softball interview with Vladimir Putin, you can't even call these interviews, to his non-interview with Nick Fuentes. Um, it doesn't surprise me that Tucker's sort of like, laughing all the way to the bank with this shit. What continues to just shock me is how many people on the right, just if they see what they consider the establishment, or what they consider the left criticizing something, it doesn't matter how bad it is, it has to be defended at all costs. And and look, Ted Cruz condemned this, National Review condemned this, um,
They're
you
all
know,
part of it.
the Republican Jewish Coalition
All part of it.
condemned it, Ben Shapiro,
All
but
part of
like,
it.
d- but
All
yeah,
part
they're
of it.
all part of it. And like, don't they realize like what they have created?
Um,
The
they
answer is
are
no.
all they are all part of something that is terribly putrid and rotten, that is metastasizing, that is steeped in hate and bigotry and division, that has become enamored of its shame. And some of the greatest poisons of human history are reforming 80 years after a war that killed 100 million human beings, and 3 generations of political leaders oriented through both parties in this country, that nothing like that could ever happen again. And step by step, through the malignancies of replacement theory, the dogmas of the far right have been unleashed and loosed, and the insanity of the algorithm has done its work, and something is ready to explode. And Americanism is the antidote to all of this, to all of it. And that's where we have to find our way back towards. But I'll say this: when you talk about J.D. Vance,
Yeah.
this is a guy with brown-skinned kids who was an apologist for the bigotry of one of Elon Musk's tech goons in the early days of Doge, who hated his children because for J.D. Vance, the acceptance of the bigots is more important to him than anything. And so over and over again, he has betrayed those kids by defending the values that say that because they are brown skinned, they are subhuman. J.D. Vance has done that. And then he stood up on a stage and he hoped that his wife would convert from the faith that he married her in to the new political faith that has as a part of it a supremacy that says She is less than. This is all so sick, there's no words. But Donald Trump does not have the power to invert reality, to make 1 + 1 is 3, or to turn red into blue or blue into red unless we let him. And you can only let him if you submit and surrender your agency and your sovereignty. And though Tucker Carlson has a big audience, his audience is not big enough to take anything from us. But when there comes a time to put into a choice these monstrous beliefs, we should appreciate that we're much closer to what Tucker Carlson believes in this country, because Donald Trump has taken us to where? Not to the end of the road, to the beginning of the end of the road. And that's what we have to understand, is that a great evil has become common and people have grown used to it very quickly. And that being able to recognize the lethality of what's boiling is necessary for human survival. And if that sounds extreme, think again, because this was the central seminal lesson articulated by statesmen from 1945 until 2016, which is neither the beginning nor the end of history.
Well, this is a good way to segue into final thing here, Steve. Tomorrow is election day.
Yep.
Off-year elections, governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey, the mayoral contest in New York City. A few other big cities like Boston have mayoral contests, but they seem uncontested. And then, to me, what is one of the most important elections is Prop 50 in California. Let's just end. It's 1 o'clock. Let's just end on some final thoughts about what to look for tomorrow and what the post-election conversation is going to be Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday. What do you think?
I think Proposition 50 will pass decisively. I think Spanberger will win decisively. I'm curious about what this New Jersey election shapes up to be. I don't really have a bearing on it, but New Jersey performs, I think, a little bit outside of some of the national current here, maybe in a way that has to do with New Jersey, not Trump. And there's a Trump discount if you're in New Jersey, because in New Jersey, we're familiar with Trump, right? He's been in our frontal lobe for 50 years. So he doesn't have the impact there that he has in other places. Very difficult for the same party to win a third term. It's been a lackluster Democratic campaign, and there's always an anti-tax populism in New Jersey. And for some reason, the Democratic candidate left open the possibility of raising taxes while running on really empty promises of lowering costs with no plan.
Yeah,
Mondami, I can say I think that plan is ridiculous to lower costs, but at least he has a plan, right?
yeah,
I can say
yeah.
it's a bad plan, but nobody can say he doesn't have a plan. Um, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a good day for Democratic candidates. But beware the Democratic leaders who are out there talking about today's a good day for Democrats. No, it's a rejection of MAGA at the first opportunity that can be a harbinger of a building wave, but it's no endorsement of America's opposition party that remains reviled, ill led by men like Chuck Schumer, who cannot meet this moment because they cannot see this moment and are every day endangering the future of the republic with their appeasements and incompetence.
Well, I agree with you on all of on the three big ones. Prop 50 is going to pass. It's going to be a huge victory for Gavin Newsom.
Yep.
The polling, clusters around 55 to 60% support. But that's not the end of it. The gerrymandering wars have moved to, basically a new state every day, including Virginia. The Democrats just announced a special session, which I thought it was kind of interesting that they did that right before the election. You could see that not being a great thing for Abigail Spanberger, who wants to win over a lot of Republicans who are really turned off by the Republican gubernatorial nominee. But Virginia looks lean D. If Spanberger doesn't win, the Democrats are going to be in absolute crisis if that race turns south here. New Jersey looks like a coin flip, though, Steve. I think people have to be prepared for this MAGA Republican candidate who's running for the third time to eke out potentially eke out a victory. I mean, I'm just looking at the polls here. It's everywhere from Cheryl +8 to a statistical tie, and so
She should be okay. But if
we'll
you're a
see.
Democrat, you need to get out and vote. And we can talk more about that campaign in the aftermath. But
Yeah,
she didn't light up the scoreboard, as they
no.
say.
No, and look, you're from New Jersey. I'm from Long Island. Long Island has become much more MAGA in the last decade, and parts of New Jersey have as well.
Yeah.
But you're right to point out that there are some important local issues going on in New Jersey that color that color that race. I mean, if you notice, it's not like Trump went and campaigned in New Jersey because they don't think he's an asset. So maybe we should do a special conversation.
We can do it.
Let's talk offline Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday, and wrap up the elections because I know there's going to be an enormous amount of interest in that. Good one today, man. I'm sorry about the
Well,
Blue Jays. There's always next year.
always next year. Always next year. But it was a great ride. Great
It's a great
ride.
ride. Thank you, everyone, for
Bye.
joining us. We'll see you soon.
Take care.